Hi, Pei. Welcome to the Cosmic Heartist Podcast. It is such a treat to have you here. I would love if we could start by you sharing a little bit about you or a lot about you and some of your favorite things in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Peyton Bryant, and I go by Pay for most people, like friends and family, and on Instagram, I guess. So I guess everyone. But yeah, so I am a mother of four in Virginia, living in the Blue Ridge Mountains here, and absolutely love it. This is like my home, my heart home, really. And I am, let's see, gosh, it's so hard to like sum it up, you know? I mean, I'm a writer, a poet, a storyteller, a women's circle leader, um, a crow lady, the neighborhood crow lady. I'm so many things, but that's kind of the gist of it. And I love, reading and writing and fantasy. That is a very big part of my love and my hobbies. And yeah, I think that's a good little like roundabout description.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how when I was asking you where you live, I was like, wait, where do you live again? I feel like you live in Narnia. Just because of everything that you share on your Instagram and the way that you are. I think the way that you show up, it's just so regal. And it kind of feels like it's from a time that's not this time. And so I think it's so cool that you bring all this wisdom and all this magic with you. And I mean, saying that, I'm thinking about how none of us really are probably from this lifetime, and we're all from like different lifetimes and different, I don't know, planets, and we're all just coming together, like looking like pretty humans, but we're sharing all of this like deep, deep, deep magic and wisdom and keys that we have encoded in us. And I think the keys that you share are just really very magical. And I think it's so cool that you're also into fantasy because I feel like you're able to take that and like use it in your work. Like the way you write poetry, as I was telling you before we started recording this, it's it has the ability to make the reader live in the entire not even just moment, like in the entire setting that you're setting up. And I think it's so precious to be able to do that and while you're painting that picture still be bringing in like things that are happening with so much oomph, and you do that so beautifully. So I'm curious to know how your poetry journey started and when did you start writing and how did you start getting deeper into writing your
Yeah.
truth in a way that you're not really I guess second guessing yourself or maybe afraid to share it with the world because it's deep, big truths.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the ones lately, like the more that I write and the more that I post, and the more that I post, especially ones that I'm afraid to post, the more that I do it, it's crazy. I just feel like the deeper the truth gets, like the deeper the well. But gosh, I mean, I have been writing since I was a little girl. I can remember as far back as like 5, 6 years old, writing things, little short stories, and what was poetry to me, but I didn't have a word for back then. And so along the way, I mean, bringing fantasy into it again and kind of circling back to that, it was such a huge part of my life growing up. Like I truly believed, I mean, you mentioned Narnia. Like that was one of the worlds I love to be in. And I really immersed myself in these fantasy worlds growing up. And I think as a child, it was an escape for me in a lot of ways. And just a way to kind of step out of my reality. And it really has inspired so much of my writing, though, these like mythical themes and gods and goddesses and stories and all of these things, they live in me. But yeah, so as a child, I wrote a lot. And then when I grew up, so I have four children, like I said. My oldest son is 11 years old and I'm 30. So I had him when I was 19. So I was an itty bitty baby myself. And So, and then came his sister and their sister, and then the last one. And yeah, for many years, I just stopped writing. And I think that back then I had sort of fallen into this, and I think a lot of mothers can relate to this sort of like martyr mother role in a way where I felt like what I was supposed to do because what I had seen in my life, and in family members and just people around me, what I saw was that was what we did. You pour your all into your children and you are last. And I went many years with that mindset. And honestly, what the big thing that shifted it, and it's funny because I'm thinking about this too. Like, I stopped writing. I also stopped reading fantasy too. Like, I stopped reading fiction. I kind of fell into the rabbit hole of like, okay, I'm an adult now. I read self-help, and nonfiction. Like, this is what we do as adults. And so, yeah, I hit this point where last year, this is so crazy actually how it all coincided. But and I'm sure that you've talked about it on here before, but Poems and Power, this like worldwide membership full of magical women and poets and creatives. I had been following Chelsea for a while, and I was really curious about what she was doing. But I joined in March of last year, and it's funny, the same month I started reading A Court of Thorns and Roses. It's this very big, popular romantasy series by Sarah J. Maas. And so at the same time, I guess I was watching these classes, these poetry classes that Chelsea was doing, and I was listening to these women and their stories, and I was experiencing you all and your stories and your writing and the way that, just seeing other women tell their truth and step into their power and to their light and to their boldness, their audaciousness. And it really, inspired me just on the deepest level. And so at the same time, I'm experiencing these amazing fantasy worlds again for the first time. And I'm remembering like the innate magic that lives inside of me and everyone else, like all of us beautiful humans on this planet. And it was it was like a blueprint being activated again in my body. Like, when I was a little girl, I knew that magic existed. I knew it like in my bones, like, there was no doubt. And so just being bathed in poetry, bathed in authenticity, bathed in magic and the mythic and all of these things just at the same time, it just blew me open, honestly. And I started writing again. And so I went to Chelsea's event in June in Los Angeles, and I had never flown by myself before that moment. And, that was a big jump for me. I'm on the East Coast, and that's all the way on the West Coast. So I flew alone with my youngest baby Ruru to this amazing event that Chelsea did, and just like met so many of you incredible women in Poems and Power. And I came back home from that trip and I was like, I literally can do anything. If I can do that, I can do anything. Like, I'm going to publish my book. I'm going to start my women's circles. I'm going to perform in an open mic. And then I did all three. And like, it's just been, like Chelsea says, like stepping on an unstoppable train ever since. So yeah, now we're here.
I love all of that. And I feel like everyone on this that listens to this podcast religiously is probably like, who is Chelsea? And I really need to know her because I feel like you might be maybe the eighth to 10th woman that I've had here from Poems and Power. And, each time it's a woman from Poems and Power, of course, we're talking about Chelsea. And of course, we're talking about, how she's woken us up to this deeper part of ourselves just by being so alive herself. Like, it's not that she's even doing anything to us. She's just so alive in the way that she expresses and the way she shares and the way that she teaches, that holding that like as a leader and attracting a tribe around that, like you said, we're all like feeling each other. We're not just feeling ourselves anymore. We're not feeling just her. We're not feeling just the writer that, or the person, the woman that she's channeling. We're feeling everybody. And it's that collective thread running through us. And I think it's magic to have that, because now, like, say I wrote a poem or I wrote a line the other day and I saw a post by Kimmery, and she had written a line about something similar. And I was like, wait, this is so cool. Now that thread that's running between all of us has just become so much more clear and so much louder. And I think that's magic. And then I also love how you said when you were a kid, you knew that magic existed. Like there was no doubt about that. And I feel like for so many of us, especially girls, growing up, like we know that magic exists. You know, we see flowers, we hang out with um nature. And it's usually within nature that we realize that magic really does exist, right? And it's so common that we lose our way and that we stop writing and that we stop reading because it's similar what happened to me too, that I would write maybe since I was 11 or 12 and then stopped writing somewhere in between. And now that I've started writing again, I can't even imagine why I stopped writing, right? I feel like for so many of us, it's like that. It's like this lifeline and we're like, why did I even stop? But then it's also that we need to be inspired. And so something that you said, I think was so beautiful. You said you were reading this fantasy book at the same time that you were doing classes or that you started classes. And it's like you were giving yourself a deeper muse. Like, yes, your life is your muse, you are your muse, but as you're reading fantasy, like you said, you're allowing yourself to escape into a new world. And so then you're starting to see and feel textures that someone that's living solely on this world wouldn't really get to see or feel or experience or share about. So I have multiple questions from here, and this is like a little landing point. But my first question is, I'm really interested in getting into fantasy and maybe reading my first fantasy novel. So what would you recommend?
Oh my gosh, this is my favorite question. um, well, I the first one that I always recommend is A Court of Thorns and Roses, just because that seems to be like the gateway drug that brings people back in. Because I talk to so many people, especially women, that are like, I used to love to read when I was a kid, and I would just, blow through books like crazy. And then I just like haven't been able to focus or to do it again. I haven't felt like the excitement about it. And it seems like that series is like once you step on to that train, it's like you just keep going. But that one, and I mean, my favorite is Throne of Glass. That's another series by the same author, and that series will change your life. Like I know this sounds like bold, but it changed my life. Like I feel like my DNA was permanently altered from reading that. And I think it's like another thing about it is like all of these fantasy books that are written by women, um, there's just this like, and it's the same thing that Chelsea does, honestly. She gives us permission. It's like, it's not that we ever needed permission to be ourselves, to have desires and to realize them and to say, oh my gosh, I'm worthy of this. It's just that it's like you said, it's like by her just being it, it's like, I don't know, just like living that experience in her own life. And we see that and we're like, okay, well, if her desires are holy, maybe mine are too. And so that theme you see in a lot of these fantasy books written by women, it's like women who know what they want and don't feel bad about saying it. And I think that is huge. Like we just need that so much.
Yeah. Yes. And I love that it's becoming more alive in today's world that more women are just living our biggest, our most creative lives, which are just invisible permission slips to every other woman, which is just incredible. And one of my biggest missions with this podcast as well. That's why I love interviewing like beautiful artists like you and artists like you, because I feel like once we start having these conversations and more people start listening in, more people realize, wait, I can think like that too. Like, I bet you so many of us think, oh, I'm an adult now, I can only read self-help. So many of us have gone through that. And then we've gone through that self-help rabbit hole and then been like, wait, this is so boring. I never want to read again.
Yes. Please make it stop.
Yes, yes. And then I figured that the easiest way is to have multiple different books that I'm reading at a time. So yes, I can be reading self-help, but it's also important to have like a fiction book that's really allowing me to still get into my creativity. Um, And so another thing that I was going to ask is, don't you think, something that I've realized, don't you think it's so important to be reading, or somehow putting yourself in the way of inspiration? But I feel like reading is a really good way to do it, to inspire words to flow out of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh, absolutely. And it's like no matter what it is, I feel like it and it doesn't even have to be fantasy, but like something that feeds your soul, you know, whether that's poetry, maybe like you are fed by self-help. Some people like maybe that is soul food that is you know, for them and their own heart. So I think that, oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. There's just so much that can be gleans from reading another person's experience, whether it's fictional or true. I think that that is huge. Absolutely.
And it's so different reading a long form piece of work rather than reading a caption on Instagram. You know, that's like still reading, and I think that's still powerful reading because you're still getting a glimpse into someone's story. But I think the beauty of reading is that we just, like you said, we get an escape, and it's a healthy escape. You know, there are escapes that are really unhealthy, and there are escapes that are pretty healthy. And I was recording a podcast with one of my favorite astrology teachers, Jana Romer, a few episodes ago, and we were talking about the Virgo and Pisces South Node and North Node. And Pisces, when we talk about Pisces, escapism is a word that comes up. And she was saying how I was like, oh, we don't want to escape. She was like, actually, through this time, I wouldn't blame you if you felt like you needed to put in little escapes because the world is pretty crazy. And so just thinking of that, I feel like reading is such a healthy escape to put in because it's something that actually inspires us. Like whenever I feel like I don't have the words for poetry, as soon as I open a book and start reading, I get so many lines that I'm like, oh my God, I want to write an after poem about this and an after poem about this and an after poem about this. Because then all of a sudden, I guess the part of our brain that's not usually being touched by 3D life is being touched. And it's like, hey, I want to do that too. I want to make art too.
Yes, so true. And like that's what we're doing in class too, in poetry class, like hearing each other read and you know, like I want to write after poems after all of you. Like you guys are posting
Yes.
like incredible poems and it's true. And like that's what I feel like when women gather in general though, like that happens. Like whether we're writing poetry, whether we're just like chatting about everyday life, like it is wild to me and especially in women's circle because like that's what I do. I just, it's crazy to see the things that it will awaken, like just talking to another woman, you know, like, not to go down this rabbit hole, but like, you know, I see why they didn't want women together, you know, like, I mean, it is powerful beyond measure. And if you are a system who is afraid of, you know, people connecting and realizing their power and realizing, just yeah, I mean, what's possible, you know, like, of course that would be scary. And I think it just happens every time women to get together in any capacity. It's really, really amazing.
I think that's a beautiful rabbit hole to go down, actually, because it's just so evident. And the more I hang out with women that feel like soul food, the more I'm like, wow, I had so much of my childhood taken away from me by believing that like women were meant to judge each other or, you know, talk about what the other one's wearing or talk about, you know, just all this shit. Like there's been so much shit that's come on top of like women coming together and gathering. And when we pull all of that away, when we get to the root of it, it's like, oh my God, this is why. Because we all have our little girls living within us, those same little girls that believed in magic. And all of a sudden, that little girl feels seen by whoever they're talking to. And then they feel like it's okay to let her out. And in exchange, that's how the conversation ends up unfolding. It's two little girls that were once upon a time wounded because maybe they didn't want to ask someone to be their best friend in the covered court in school. Um, and now it's like, wait, let's just like every woman I connect with through Chelsea, almost every woman, I'm like, tell me your favorite thing about yourself, because there is just such deep um, magic in women actually talking about what our favorite things are about ourselves. And also that's an in to go so much deeper into someone's side. And I asked you something similar too. I was like, tell me something random about you. And you shared with me something really interesting about when you were a kid. Would you like to share it over here?
Yeah, yeah, we can totally do that. Oh my gosh, I'm trying to figure out what the best way is to like go about it. Um, yeah, so as a child, it was very, very common for me to experience spirits. And we were talking a bit about that because I know both of us had, we went through major loss. And so I think that's kind of how we got onto that subject. But yeah, as a child, yeah, it was very common for me to see spirits. And there's actually, with my family in general, there's like quite a bit of history with that. If we want to go back, like, gosh, even further, I mean, my family on my mother's side. So I guess she would be my great great grandmother. So my grandmother raised me most of my life. And so she would tell me all kinds of stories. And so her grandmother, she would talk about how her grandmother would hold what she called table talks, and she would talk with spirits. And so my grandma, she was telling me about these stories of these table talks. And so her grandmother, my great great grandmother, would have these conversations with, like, for one spirit that she would talk to a lot was Sitting Bull. She would ask him for counsel and ask questions. And there was actually this particular story that she told me about. So I guess her son had been missing in action in the army for, oh, I can't remember what the time frame was, for a long time. They kind of had assumed that he had passed, that he was dead. And so she went and she had a table talk about it. And so she reached out and she asked, is my son alive? And so they would communicate in knocks, apparently. So 2 knocks for yes and 1 for no. And then, so on and so forth. So she asked if he was alive, and the answer was yes. And so she said, will he come home? Answer was yes. And she was like, knock for the amount of months or something like that. And so he knocked 7 times. Her son did end up coming home 7 months later or something crazy like that. I mean, it was wild. So I think about stories like this and I'm like, okay, it makes sense. Like there's something, there's something here. But as a child, I would draw a lot of the things that I would see. And again, like my family, we, like on that side, they have never been overly religious, really. Definitely like believed in the spirit world because they had just experienced it as well themselves so many times. Like my family, this is kind of a wild story and it sounds very woo, but it's very true and we'll just tell it. But yeah, so before I was born, my family, my mother and her mother, my grandmother, they went through a period of time where they really had a lot of negative experiences with spirits. And so it got to the point, and again, this is like, it's really saying something because they were not overly religious people. They weren't regular churchgoers or anything like that, but they were having all these experiences. And it had gotten to the point where they kind of just like, they were like, I don't know what to do. Like these things are happening. They were afraid, and so they went to a priest actually, just not knowing where to turn. And so, and the priest was like, okay, a baby is going to be born that's going to protect your family from what you're going through, from these spirits that are harassing you essentially. And so my mom at the time did not know she was pregnant with me, but she had me. And it's actually really funny because my mom was 17 years old when she got pregnant with me. Literally her first time ever and having sex, and she got pregnant with me. And here I am. And so, yeah, and according to them, they haven't had the experiences that the negative experiences that they had been having since I was born. I don't know if what he said is actually true, but according to my family, it seems to be. But I remember growing up seeing things and it was very normal to me. I really don't remember ever being afraid. And like I said, like I would draw them and my mom would ask me about it and we'd have conversations and it was so normal to me. And at this point in my life, like I'm 30 now and I don't see spirits, but I do, like, there is a feeling like, when you have one in the room. And so it's kind of, it reminds me of, a women's circle that I went to a couple years ago. We did this activity where one of us would close our eyes and the next person that we were working with, they would walk towards us and we would practice like feeling, we would open our eyes when we thought that person was standing next to us. And that's kind of like, that's how I would describe the feeling, is like when there is a spirit or entity of some sort, like I still have that feeling of like, there's something here. But it's just not visual anymore. But my children also, especially when they were small, would have these experiences as well of being able to see and communicate with spirits on the other side. But yeah, so I don't know if it's something like with our family. I'm not sure. I'm still figuring it out, honestly. But yeah, it has been a very big part of my life, my whole life.
That's really, really cool because I've never really seen spirits. I've heard about them. I've heard stories because, here in the Philippines, we call the different states that we have provinces. And we all grow up with, most of the people grow up with nannies from the provinces. So when the nannies come to the city, they tell us these stories from the provinces about the dwarves that they see and the fairies that exist there and the tree spirits and all the different spirits. And, I remember being like 6 or 7 sitting outside in my garden with my friends and a nanny, and she would be telling us these stories. And I would be looking around the garden being like, oh my God, are there dwarves here where we're sitting? And they're like, they can be. So there is this belief in the Filipino culture where when you walk on grass at night, you say tabi tabi po. It's like, excuse me, can I pass? And people still say that. And even if people don't believe, I feel like, even if they don't believe that there may be spirits or there may be stuff in the like energies residing in the grass, they still kind of say it as a way of like, they're just used to it. But it's so cool because that means that subconsciously they actually believe it, which is why they're saying like, excuse me, can I pass? But so I'm curious to know, one, do you still have those drawings? And two, what did they look like when you used to see them when you were younger?
Yeah. So, oh my gosh, I wish I still had the drawings. We have moved so many times over the years that I really don't have a lot of stuff from my childhood, which is really sad. I wish that I did though. Back then, so I would draw them as I remember, so I would draw them on the walls for one, when I was really little. And I remember back then, to me, like those particular ones that I would draw all the time were sort of like formless. But I remember as I got older, I had one experience. So we lived in Michigan when I was in elementary school. And I remember this one experience that I had. And so our bedroom was in the basement in this house, me and my sister. So we shared a room in the basement. And so we had to go down this flight of steps when we go to our room. And so I had this experience one time going down to our room of a man. And so, and this is really heavy, but so I'm like trying to find the best way to explain this. And I don't want to like trigger, like I don't want it to be a trigger too, but it was obvious to me. So at the time I was probably maybe 7 or 8 years old, I think. And so, at this time of my life, I knew nothing about like taking one's life. But I had this experience with this man that I saw in the stairwell, and it was obvious to me, like I could feel his emotions. And I could see him clear as day, but it was like he was almost like smoke. Like I could see the edges of his form and his features, but it was like an almost like a lavender, like a purple smoke. Like I know that sounds wild, but that's how I experienced it. But it was like a full, like it felt like experiencing his emotions through my body. Um, and I've never had an experience specifically like that ever again. Um, But it was just really interesting because I mean, at the time, again, like I knew nothing about suicide or what that meant, or, but in that moment, I could feel that that was his story, and that like I don't know, I guess it was just like an empathic moment, almost like, I don't know, I've just washed with this feeling of deep, deep sadness and deep grief. And again, I was like 7 or 8 years old. So I hadn't experienced this level of human emotion. But that is the one that sticks out in my mind still to this day, like 30 years old. Like I have never forgotten that moment. Yeah.
What did you do after?
Um, I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell anyone. Because first of all, I think that at that age, I'd kind of reached a point of not thinking that people would believe me, I guess. And it's something that I still don't really talk about very often because of that. Um, I guess feeling like, yeah, I mean, people are going to think that you are insane. um, but yeah, I didn't tell anyone about it. But in that house specifically, like we had a lot of experiences there. Like we had this little piano that we would play. It wasn't a piano, it was a keyboard, like the little portable. And like the buttons on the keyboard would like turn on and off. And I mean, things like that were like really scary actually at the time. Like again, I've never experienced a spirit that made me feel afraid, but like just like the unseen, like sitting in bed in the middle of the night as a child, like stuff like that was pretty spooky. Um, and then yeah, like we would have weird experiences like that. Someone would turn the laundry light on and off, like little things like that. There was definitely like some sort of energy there, and whether you believe in ghosts or spirits, or whether as humans we're energy, and the places that we live and the places that we have an impact on, we sort of, the energy, there's like a something left over, like I don't know, I think anything is possible, who knows. um but yeah.
That's so interesting. I think it's just so cool to be believed as a child, or to feel like we would be believed as a child. Because if
Yeah.
you did share that with somebody who believed you and who didn't say, oh my God, that's bad, don't do that, or just like disconnect from that, then that would have actually probably started your gifts unfolding so early. Still kind of scary though, I can imagine, because like you're saying, you were so young, you had no idea like the depth of emotion that's possible in the human world, and apparently in the spirit world too.
Yeah.
And to be able to experience that within your body, I mean, it's pretty scary, but at the same time, it's so powerful. And so I'm curious, since you know what that feels like, experiencing it from somebody that was more energetic than human, do
Yeah.
you feel like now you're able to feel the same, not the same, but similar, even from humans around you, empathically?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I think that, yeah, I mean, I had to be really intentional about clearing my own space for that reason, because it can be so easy for me to pick up on things like that and to like hold them. Uh, and like now, knowing that I have a tendency to do that, I know how to take care of myself and to set boundaries and to clear and to do all of these things. But it's really been like all of this process has been so self-learned. Like nobody taught me how to do that.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh. I mean, yeah, anyone in my life knows like if something's going on and like we're gonna be hanging out, like I'm going to like, yeah, yeah, there can't be any secrets. I think. Yeah, it's definitely like feelings and emotions come across very clear to me, both, yeah, in living humans as well.
So, what are some of your favorite ways to cleanse or to work with it and to make sure that, because sometimes we want to use it. We want to be able to help the person by putting ourselves in their shoes, but also we don't want to be overwhelmed with our emotion that we don't feel our own emotions anymore, that we kind of feel like wonky in our own bodies. Because once we feel like we don't have access of our own bodies, I think that's when things starts to get tricky and life starts to get pretty trippy, because it's like, wait, but I'm the main soul in here and I can't access it. So what are some of your favorite ways to cleanse and to remove energy that's not yours, um, while still kind of seeing the person and
Yeah.
understanding the person?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I feel like, and I'm both like in my personal relationships and like with coaching and things like that. I feel like when I'm in it with someone, like I'm in it, you know. And I think that it's so important, like for me, for there just to be like a clear container for it, you know. And so, and to, yeah, like, of course, we want to be empathetic. We want to be able to drop into someone else's experience and drop into their shoes and really, um, it just, it allows us to come from a place of understanding, I think. So it's very necessary to be able to do that, I think, definitely. But I think it really comes down to like the boundaries in the container and knowing, okay, like when I step out of, um, this coaching container or this conversation with a friend, like I need to have my own like spiritual hygiene. Like that's really what it is. And my number one, I mean, this is my go-to for that is time in nature, like bare feet on the earth. And my favorite visualization that I really, really like to do is so imagining that we're like anchoring into the earth, sending roots out from our tailbone. And kind of what I imagine is when I'm breathing, and visualizing, so these roots kind of just anchored into the earth. And so as I'm breathing, I bring up that earth energy like through my energy centers. So yeah, just starting from the bottom and going all the way up to the crown. And it's like it's more detailed than that, I guess, but like bringing the air in. So if I'm breathing into like the heart space, I'm going to breathe in and imagine the earth's energy moving up through and up into my heart and like clearing out what's there, what needs to be moved out, what's not mine, and just setting that intention of, dropping what's not mine and letting the earth hold it and letting her transmute that. And just as I'm breathing out, pushing it back down through each center and back down into the earth. And there's so many good ways to do it though. Like that's my favorite, especially if I have like a good chunk of time. But I mean, I love getting in the shower and just like imagining like cleansing like your aura, just imagining the water like just running over your own energetic space and clearing everything out. And one thing that I really like to do, especially at the end of the day, is like I release anything that's not mine, anything that I'm holding that doesn't belong to me. I let it go and I release it. And I think that the intention is so powerful because, like, I truly believe, I mean, our words are magic spells. Absolutely, 100%. I feel like as poets, like you just like, that you start writing stuff down and they start coming true. It's pretty insane. And so I think it's, yeah, just putting the intention of, I'm going to put this down, everything that's not mine, like, let it go, let it go. And let me, there's another thing too that I like to do is like any pieces of someone else that I'm holding on to, like, may they be returned to that person. And also calling back lost pieces of myself too, that I may have left with others. Like I like to verbalize that, whether it's in my head or out loud, like, may I be whole in all my pieces, return home, back to myself. But there's so many good ways, there's smoke clearing and all of these things too. But I think those two, like the shower visualization and just, yeah, sitting on the earth and really anchoring. And I think that she is, I mean, the mother, she is the absolute greatest medicine, greatest healer that we have available to us. And like, I feel like she wants to hold that for us. Like she wants to be here for us. She wants to love us, nourish us, hold us. Like, yeah. And I think it's so powerful to do that.
I so agree, especially when we're doing work for her. or in her name or in the name of love rather than throwing our shit on the grass for no reason. Something I am very like like very passionate about sharing about how like I feel like we're here to raise the planet's frequency.
Ah,
And in feeling our own emotions fully and in reclaiming every part of ourselves, we are kind of being kinder to the earth versus when we give into like more intense feelings of like anger and frustration and sadness, and we're projecting that outward, we're also projecting that onto our mama planet. I also love that you started with nature and with water, because oftentimes what we hear about now is smoke clearing or smoke cleansing with sage and with Palo Santo. And people can be like, oh, I don't have access to that, so I guess I can't cleanse. So I love how you're like, it's really simple. You just got to go out, take your shoes off, and put your feet on the grass and visualize. And it's also so cool how life is all about intentionality, isn't it? Like we can be standing there on the grass being like, oh, it's so hot. And we may not be receiving the same thing. Or we
yes.
can be standing there on the grass being like, all right, I'm anchoring in. Maybe we don't want to do a visualization. Maybe we're like, I'm anchoring in and I know that you're holding me, Earth. Thank you. That simple. But it is so much more magical when we actually get into it and do that visualization. I have Healy running coherence, and I know that you use Healy too. And I'm thinking about a time that I put it on a root chakra program, and I went and sat under a palm tree, and I had the back of my head like on the tree, and I had the root chakra program. At the end of it, I felt high, like high with nature, and it was so good. So I think just using these tools that we have, I also want to get back to Healy a little bit later and ask you how you use it. Okay, I think this is a great place to go into your circles. Share with us what you do in your circles and what did those look like?
Yeah. So right now they're all virtual, which is great because we can connect from anywhere in the world. But yeah, so right now what it looks like, so it's called Wolves and Women Collective. And so we meet up virtually via Zoom. The Sunday closest to the full moon and the Sunday closest to the new moon. So yeah, I mean, we have kind of like a flow that we go through for each one. And there'll be different themes, you know. So, like right now, we're doing a Path of the Poets thing. So, every full moon, we are kind of circling around a different wildish woman poet. And so, typically, we will drop in and light a candle and kind of set the space in the container. And so we'll talk about our theme and what it is and explore that. And then we usually do a meditation adventure together and journaling and set intentions and share. And it's not, you know, it's like you can come and have your camera off and listen if you want to. It's not like you have to, you know, come and feel like you have to share something. But I mean, it's amazing when we can, though. Gosh, yeah. I mean, the things that we were talking about this earlier, just the magic that happens when women share, especially in circle, because it's just like you feel so seen and heard just on a level that is, I don't like, for me, like sitting in women's circle for the first time, it changed my entire life. Like I couldn't believe the things that I felt comfortable saying to these women who were complete strangers at the time. I was like, why do I feel like what's happening to me? I'm like bawling within the first 5 minutes. And back then, like I feel like my heart was so closed. Like I had just built armor on top of it, layer upon layer for so many years in like my early 20s. And just like I sat in the circle for the first time and I was like just bawling my eyes out within the first 5 minutes. This is like with a woman locally here a few years ago. And yeah, I just like, I couldn't believe how comfortable I felt immediately. And there's just something about it, like the safety that you feel. And so that's what we're doing. Like, we're just sharing what comes through, you know, whether it's in meditation, whether it's, you know, when we're talking about the theme, like just each woman comes with, I mean, we all just have this very unique, very specific magic and medicine that we're here. And it's just like we don't have to do anything but be ourselves and to uncover like our truest of true and just share it. Like that's how we become medicine for others. And I think that's what happens in circle. Like we're just kind of setting each other off in these magical directions and awakening and remembering who we are through the magic of storytelling and sisterhood. And yeah, just remembering what it is to be in relationship with women truly, not what we were taught it looks like you were talking about earlier. Just like, yeah, no competition, no like I have to be prettier than her, I have to be smarter, I have to be this. Like it's like, no, we are all so unique and so like our medicine is so specific to us. Like nobody else could bring it. And we just like you come into circle and you remember, and it's really beautiful. But that's a long answer for what it is.
It sounds like magic, and I totally agree. And I'm feeling you on that because when it is women and only women that are there for the same purpose, and we all know we're there together, and we all know we're there to connect, the you know how you were talking about energy and how everything has energy, like the room gets the energy of that, of like wanting to connect. And I find it so fascinating that even if there's one person that's off, or like one man, or like one person that doesn't really want to be there, all of a sudden the energy is a bit more wonky.
Yeah.
And you feel it, like it's visceral. So I think it's really cool to have these spaces where we allow it to be like an open room for people that want to show up. But I also feel like it's so important to have the integrity of it be right.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, what do you think is a way to go about that? Would it be like by the price point that it is to access the container? Is that the investment? Is that what makes people feel like, okay, I'm showing up to this level or to this degree? Or would it like, would it, I know intention is a big thing, but what else? Do you get what I'm asking? Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that that's part of it too. Like, yeah, I feel like if you are paying, like it's an investment in yourself, right? So yeah, I feel like if you're paying to access the container, it does. I mean, and from my own experience, I feel that way. Like if I'm paying like for poetry classes, I'm going to show up to every live class that I can, and watch all the replays and just like get every little piece of magic from it that I can. So I think that's absolutely part of it. Um, I don't know. That's a good question. Like I think that that's for sure a part of it. Um, I don't know. I think it's something too, though, that like once you get into spaces like these, it almost becomes it's like, when you're talking about when you started writing again and you're like, how did I ever go without this? I feel like you get into these containers and you're like, how did I not have this in my
Yeah.
life? Now, like this is so nourishing and it feeds me in such a way like I can't imagine my life without it. So I think that happens too. Like um and for me too, like before coming into anything like this, like 2020 when I was first kind of stepping into this world of women's work and all of these things and experiencing it myself for the first time, there was totally this fear though, like going into it of like, oh my gosh, like being seen truly, like, oh my gosh, this is scary. But yeah, you just get in there and you're like, oh my gosh, yeah, i I can't imagine my life without it. Yeah.
I love that. I feel like it's just like a tuning fork. Like once we are like in that frequency, we
Yeah.
know, like our bodies just know. And when we are there without the right intention, we just don't show up the next time anymore because, when you are that one person that's disrupting the energy flow, you kind of know that as well. So I think it's just so powerful to be surrounded by women and to be in these groups. We'll round up very soon here. I just want to ask you about your experience with Healy and how you use it. Do you use it at all for spiritual hygiene?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love my Healy. I'm so glad that we're talking about this actually, because this is a full circle moment right now. When I started Healy, when I got my Healy, I was in the business side of it first, and I mean that's still part of my life on a smaller scale now. But that is actually the reason why I started showing up on social media. That's the whole reason why my like poetry even exists on a social media page. Like I before Healy, like I didn't even feel comfortable like talking to a screen, making reels, like showing my face, like my writing, like oh my gosh, I would have never done it. And so I came into the Healy world and this kind of world of marketing through social media, using this product that I mean I love. It's amazing and it has changed my life on, I mean, it's like it's been a domino effect ever since, honestly. But yeah, so I use the Aura Scan religiously. I love that so much. I use it with clients and they love it. And because you know, like you're working with when you're working with frequency and we're working in the quantum, like you're able to do that at a distance, which I love. So you know, like we can hop on a Zoom and we can look at it and see what's going on. And oh my goodness, like the first time that I did that and experienced it, the stuff that came back, I was just like, this is insane. Like, what is this futuristic technology? Like, how does
It's
it work?
crazy.
It's insane. Oh my gosh. But yeah, I use, I love the coaching too, like putting in, it's like, it's all intention. It comes back to that, putting in your intention and getting feedback on it. And it's like, it really has been like a flashlight for me on like just parts of myself and places in myself where maybe there were like maybe not blocks but just well maybe they are blocks. I don't know, maybe I can say that maybe they can be that and that's okay. I guess just like it has illuminated a lot going on in like my subconscious that I just wasn't fully aware of. Maybe things that I had like an inkling were there, but I don't know, like it's able to just put it out in such a clear way. And, you know, yeah, then you can run their frequency. And I feel like it is just an incredible tool. And I can't believe that we have access to something like this. Honestly, it feels very, very Aquarian, very just like
Yes.
amazing.
Yes, I love that. I love that. I love that you sharing this because it's so often that I'm raving about it to someone who has no idea what it is. And I'm like, there's this aura scan and it can tell you what's blocking you and it can tell you the colors of your chakra. And they're like, girl, I have no idea what you're talking about until I show it to them. And they're like, whoa, wait, like just the fact that we can get the aura scan is one of my favorite things about the Healy. So I love that you brought that up because just the way that we can get literal numbers about the level at which our chakras are operating at, that is profound. And then that we can go into those specific chakras and know exactly the beliefs that we're holding, that
Yes.
is extra next level. And then to know if we're holding it in our mind or our body, or
Yeah.
if it's coming from a belief system, from emotions or from our body, that's amazing. Like I think it's so cool that we have something like this. The smoke is agreeing with us over there in your screen. Um, it's
Yeah.
it's just so cool. So thank you for sharing. I
Like it also gets into ancestral. Like, is it karmic? Is it ancestral? Like, is it from parents, grandparents? It's insane. It just boggles my mind every day. I love it.
I love it too. And I also entered it with being in the business side, and it's still a small part of my life too. And I really want to work more on that because I feel like, there's this ick with selling or like with talking about selling something, but it's so different when it's something that we actually use and we care about and we see the difference that it makes in our own lives. And because we see that difference, we kind of want to share it with more people. But so often this language, like it's so hard to put language to a tool like this until you can show the app and be like, look, this is
Yeah.
what I mean. Like, this is what's showing up rather than just being like, oh, I have this little thing that can help you with whatever you want, and people are like, what do you mean? It's a little
Yeah.
box.
And it's such a, I feel like it's big thing to describe. Like, yeah, like you really, I feel like you have to experience it. There's not, I mean, you can try to explain it into words, and there are a lot of people in the Healy world that are so, so good at explaining it. But it's just like, yeah, once you experience it, you want to shout it from the rooftops. Like, you just can't help it. It's
Yeah.
pretty insane. It's incredible.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Thank you for talking to me about Healy and energy and all of this magic. This has been such a nice conversation. I wonder, um, I want to ask you two last questions, but before we go into those two last questions, I'm really curious how you juggle everything you do with mom life.
Oh, that's a really good question. Um, Allowing myself to ask for help is is like the biggest piece. Because, you know, like I was talking about, like the martyr mother thing, like it is so real. And so many of us grew up seeing that as a blueprint for motherhood, and we are like, no more martyr mother. Knowing that it's okay to ask for help, knowing that it's okay to, um, yeah, to take up space and do your own things and follow your own desires. Because when you are filling your own cup and you are chasing your own dreams, you're showing your daughters and your sons how to do the same. Like, I think that is so huge. And I think that is going to teach them so much more than seeing me just depleted and depressed and like not reaching for the stars, you know? And so, yeah, so the biggest piece is like, just, yes, ask for help. And if you don't have help, building a community around yourself, like having, like right now, just last year, I feel like I've finally gotten to a point of just building this really beautiful community around myself of women, and just like putting yourself out there, like being true to you and being yourself, and just like your people will find you truly. And yeah, like for us, you know, we have a group chat and we're like, hey, you know, if we need support with something, hey, can someone come and watch the kids while I do XYZ? You know, just like, yeah, finding community and staying close to one another and helping in any way that you can. And like, yeah, just like letting it be this beautiful practice of reciprocity too.
Yeah, I love all of that. I cannot relate as closely because I am not yet a mom, but I find that to be, I mean, it's so common in every culture that it's like you serve. A woman is meant to serve. And in my culture, I was taught that a woman is meant to um first kind of serve her family, you know, work with her dad, serve her dad, and then get married, and then work with her husband, and then have kids, and then take care of her kids. And, you know, this narrative has gone all the way up to my mom. And so it's on me to be like, no, no, that's not the narrative, because going back to what we were talking about, when women gather, like there is so much within us. And imagine just thinking that our whole lives we're just meant to serve, and we don't end up gathering, and we just end up serving, and we don't end up learning the magic that exists inside each of us, which is like crazy to think about because there's so much magic within each of us. And sometimes we don't see it in ourselves. But when we're having conversations like this, it brings it out within ourselves because we're honoring the magic in each other. And therefore, it's mirroring the magic that we have in ourselves. And so I think that's such a powerful reminder that it's okay to ask for help. And
Yeah.
we are in a world where, you know, Pluto just moved into Aquarius, going to be there for 20 years. So we are in this world where community is really very much becoming the backbone of everything. And it's starting with a big, like it's starting in a big way. And I'm so happy that we're here in this kind of generation where we're all showing up to help each other and create together. So thank you for being here and being magic and creating. I would love for you to share about your book if you'd like. I've been reading it. It's so good.
I'm so excited. I'm so glad you like it. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to read yours. Yeah, Pharaoh Mother Sovereign Woman. So that was the name of it came from, that was the first poem of mine that I ever shared on social media. So it became the name of the book. But yeah, I self-published back in December after, again, like going to California to this event and being in this amazing poetry group of just magical women. And yeah, did that self-publishing class and I was like, okay, I can do this, and published in December. And yeah, it's available on Amazon. And yeah, Feral Mother, Sovereign Woman by Peyton Bryant. And yeah, you can find it there.
Perfect. I'll put the link in the description of this podcast as well for easy access. Okay, Faye, my last two questions for you are what makes you a artist and where can people find you and how can they work with you?
Okay, let's see. Oh my gosh, I love the term artist. I think that is so beautiful. What makes me a artist? That's such a beautiful question. I think the biggest thing is that my heart is my compass. It is, and it's also, it's like what's a good word for it? I guess my heart is like the thing, like my heart always has feelers out. It feels like I walk around with my heart kind of like feeling and taking in all of the time, and like what wakes my heart up, what sets me on fire, like that's how I choose what to do and where to go. And so I think, yeah, to me, being a artist, it means living a heart-centered life and listening to our deeper truth. And I think that, yeah, the deepest truth lives within our hearts. And yeah, I strive to follow it in every way that I can, because I find that that leads to the most magic and just like the most aligned and beautiful experiences for me and who I am and what I'm here to do on this planet. Um, and yeah, as far as finding me, you can find me on Instagram at mama.laloba or at Wolves and Women Collective. And so I post poetry, I post my women's circle stuff. So yeah, I have a women's only membership space. It's called Wolves and Women Collective. And like I said, so we circle up twice a month, sometimes three. We also have a group chat space. It's called the Wild Woman Den. So we've got that going on. And when you join, you also get all of our past circles and our future circles and all of that good stuff. And I'm also a rewilding coach. So I work one-on-one with women, really just waking up to their own inner wild woman and just remembering what it means to follow your own heart as compass. So that's a good overview.
That is magic work. You're doing incredible things in the world, and I'm glad that I get to witness it. I ask everybody, or almost everybody that's on this podcast, a question that I forgot to ask you, which is, do you know your sun, moon, and rising?
Oh, I do. Yes. So I am a Libra sun, Libra moon, Pisces rising, but with a Scorpio stellium.
I see it very clearly. I love that. Thank you for sharing. I call this podcast Cosmic Heartist because I feel like I like to tie in the cosmic of it, and I like to ask what the signs are, what your signs are in the beginning, just so that as people are listening, they see the unfolding of the signs. But they'll hear this one at the end. It will be something to stay for.
I love that so.
Thank you so much for being here. It's been so nice having a conversation with you.
No, this has been so good. Thank you so much for having me. It means everything. This is so much fun.